Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk About Christianity. I'm Zach, and that's Pablo, and we're your hosts for this awesome iTunes podcast and radio program. Paulo, how are you doing today, man?
Fine, buddy. It's good to see you again.
It's good to see you too, man. It's good to see you too.
Yeah,
I
good
don't
to
know
see you.
where
It's been
Keith's at this
good
morning.
week.
I don't know
I'm
where Keith's at.
I'm just hanging out over
I
here.
haven't seen him all day long.
Just hanging out over
Oh, hey,
here.
Keith. Oh, there he is.
Yep. Um, I was over here writing numbers down. So yes, we are a day late in recording this week, but
My fault.
it happens sometimes. So we do what we can,
I'm a college
and
kid.
we will. We're gonna make it all work. This is season 2, episode number 27, number 82 overall, and we just keep inching closer and
18.
closer to 100.
18.
Closer and closer. We're gonna have to have a party on that day.
Party.
Don't know exactly what we're going to do, but
This
we're going
is
to
my
have a
idea.
party.
Are you ready? This is my idea. We go big or we go home. We get all the people who's been on the program before, and we put them all on at the same time. It may be chaos, but there's really only about five of us.
That would be chaos, but yeah, it would
Well,
be difficult just to arrange everybody's schedule to do that.
Yeah,
But
that's okay. We'll make it work.
yeah, well, we can get one of those on the program today from afar. Um, if you look,
Oh no, we don't want him on it.
yeah,
We don't want him on the program.
that looks a comfy coach.
oh yeah, it's a very comfortable chair.
He's a
And
hard worker. He works
yeah,
very hard.
John's owning it right now.
Right.
Yeah.
He's a hard worker.
But yeah, John dropped into town last night and got to spend some time with him. Excited about that. But he's owning the chair right now, and I think,
Owning it.
well, we're trying to get this recorded because Lambert's opens at like 10:30 or so. So we're shooting to be there as they open this morning. You know what I mean?
Lambert's?
Lambert's
What?
is, do you?
No, what's Lambert's?
Home the Throwed Rolls.
What's that even mean?
It's a restaurant where they throw bread at you.
Really?
Yes,
That sounds awesome.
it is totally awesome. They come out with hot rolls, and you just wave your hand, and
And they just right at you.
yep,
That's it. That's pretty awesome.
yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's you've got to experience it sometime, Zach.
Okay. All right. I'd like to have some rolls thrown at me.
And these aren't like light, fluffy rolls. These are the rolls that when you catch that roll, it sounds like a fastball hitting the catcher's mitt.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So they're a little bit harder too.
They're just solid. I mean,
That's impressive.
these are the good rolls,
Has
But
anybody ever been sued? Have they ever been sued for hitting somebody?
I don't know.
I'd say.
But I'm still just sitting here in awe that you've never heard of Lambert's before.
Where's this at? Is it in Soxton?
The original one is here in Sykeston. There's also one in Ozark, Missouri, and one in Gulf Shores, Alabama.
Okay.
So,
Interesting.
but anybody from the Midwest definitely knows Lambert's. All you got to do is say Lambert's, and they know where you're talking about. And the food's good too, not just the rolls, but
Okay.
yeah. So, and speaking of food, and now you know why I wasn't eating food, but when we all started logging on, Zach, you were eating a biscuit of some kind. Pablo, I'm still not sure what it was you were eating.
He was shoveling pasta is what he was doing. That's what he was doing. He's shoveling pasta into his mouth.
It was a piece of bread and just regular oat, no, that we make in Peru.
Yeah.
Yes, that's it.
Some traditional foods.
Yeah, that's
Traditional
I'm
Like the
food from yesterday. Yeah.
Right.
The breakfast of Peruvian champions.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Like a king.
Yeah. If you want to be, yeah, yeah. If you want to be a king, eat that breakfast.
Yep. Okay, so Pablo, what's going on in Callao?
Okay. Since it is good that people is getting involved on the organization of the church. So it's like sometimes me, my father, and other guy, we put effort on the teaching and also on the organization. And even my mom put maybe on the children classes and organization. The last 2 Sundays, me, my father, my mom, and other brothers that we were like the teachers, we rest because other members take responsibilities during the
Wow,
week.
Wow.
Yeah.
that's pretty
Yes.
cool.
That's
That
pretty
is
good.
cool.
Yes, man. One day you come to Callao. I know you will come sooner or later. The same with John. You will see how it changed in the organization. I mean, in the
Wow.
time and things like that. Since we are paying for the building, we are using the building Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Okay, very
4 days.
good.
Yes,
That's
that's
awesome.
it.
Carry on this conversation. I will be right back.
Okay.
That's awesome. That's the sign of a
Yes.
That's the sign of a growing church, though. Tell us about
Yeah.
some of the other things that you've been doing down there.
Well, during this week,
Hmm.
I've been visiting some friends from college
Right.
because I'm working of my in Peru when you finish your career, I mean
Uh-huh.
your classes,
Right.
no, you need to take an English test.
Okay. So once you
And
finish your classes, you have to take an English test.
the English test, yeah, the English test is part of the in Spanish is título. I think English is the title or
The title.
the title. Yeah, when you finish your career, with what title is on your diploma?
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, okay.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah, so the English test is part of that. So,
Okay.
but if you want to go up or you want to go more,
Mm-hmm.
you need to create or to form a project,
Right.
no, that might contribute to the society.
Okay.
And then you have that to explain this to a forum of teachers.
Right.
That is called the thesis.
Okay.
So I'm
So
working on that.
so you're currently working on that part. Okay.
Yes, on that part. Yes.
All right. What's going on in Sykeston this week, Keith? Other than the fact that John Farber's in town.
Yeah, John's in town.
That's big news.
Same
Mania.
otherwise as everywhere else. Today is opening day of baseball, and excited about that.
St. Louis Cardinals.
And otherwise, no, I don't think there's nothing super special going on.
Are the St. Louis Cardinals going to win today, Keith?
It's always hard to win opening day on the road.
Are they at? Oh, they're on the road. Okay,
Yeah,
so
they're
they're
on the
not at
road.
home.
So yeah, they've got their work cut out for them.
See, my Reds are at home today. That they're at home on their first game. They played the Pirates. So, you got Yasiel Puig in the third hole. So let's see what he can do. Let's see what he can do.
It'll be interesting. Okay, one thing I got two things here that I want to go to before we actually get into the content of the program.
Okay.
First of all, well, actually three things. First of all, let me apologize. I'm having to get the door and the phone this morning.
You're having to be preacher and secretary.
Yes.
I'm bellboy.
My secretary is not in this morning, so I'm having to kind of do that too. What I was going to say, and we touched on this here a few weeks ago, relative to the work in Callao. But in all seriousness, if you know of a congregation looking for work to support financially, please contact us, because we can put you in touch with Pablo, and
He can put you in touch with a number of congregations that are in need of financial support. So
Yes.
And I
Yes.
think, man, I really do think that's a work that a lot more congregations need to be doing. There's not a lot of congregations. You would think that there would be, but there are not a lot of congregations, as many as you think at least, that are doing that kind of work, that are supporting a congregation, that are supporting preachers, and more congregations need to be doing that kind of work because it's so important. I mean, it is so important. And Pablo can be a testament to that. I mean, he can tell you how important it is to have support and how important that is in their growth.
And we'll talk more about that later. The third thing that I wanted to mention, this is something new that that took on over the weekend and just getting it started. But we have relied a lot on Facebook for our notifications, for letting you, our listeners, know when we have released new episodes. And Facebook is they're a business, and they are in the business of making money, and they are not in the business of promoting our program.
No.
And the statistics are they've come out with a new algorithm, and basically our notifications are not appearing in people's news feeds as often as they were. And so that is hurting us, and we recognize that. And so we kind of wanted to make an offer, if you will, to send you an email update with our podcast releases. And we're not going to blanket you with spam or anything like that. And we're not going to sell your email to anyone, because who wants to have to do that accounting?
Right, and that would mess up our budget. That would mess up our budget.
Just totally mess up our budget
of $0.
You don't have to worry about us selling or anything like that. But if you would like to sign up for these email updates, you can go to our website, scroll down to the bottom, and there's a link there that you can follow to sign up for these email updates. And we're only going to email you with program updates.
Right. Nothing,
So,
no sales things, nothing
Nope.
like that. Just
Nope.
just purely when we post a podcast and maybe a program update.
Yep. So we're keeping that within our budget also. So
it's so good to have a budget, Keith, when you have a budget of nothing, because you don't have to worry about anything. You don't have to worry about allocating money to anything, because you have no money. And so when you have no money, you don't have to worry about it. No worries. It's exactly what that's the strive of this program. That's our inspirational goal. No worries, all encouragement. That's it. No worries, all encouragement.
So if you as a matter of fact, I just got an email from the email service. If you want these email updates, we can send them to you. And but you're going to have to go to our website and scroll down to the bottom and find that link, and it'll all be good.
Yep.
So
yes, we promise to send you spam.
Yeah. No spam.
Okay.
No spam.
Pablo will not have control over the email list. That's all I'm going to say.
We don't want Pablo with control over the email list.
Okay, so getting into the actual program. Last week we set out with the goal of taking Colossians chapter 3 and just tearing it apart.
We made it through 2 verses.
2 verses last week. 2 verses. And which, in the big picture, that's not bad. That's pretty good. But to sort of rehash, those 2 verses read, "If then you were raised with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ is, sitting at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on things of the earth."
Now, when you read those verses, you're like, "Oh, that can't be that much content." You're wrong.
Yeah, there is. Yeah,
there's a whole lot of content.
So that tees us up for verse 3
Yep.
in Colossians chapter 3.
I think we'll make it through 3 and 4 today, Keith. I don't
You,
know
you
about
think?
you. We may just make it through
Yeah,
3. I don't know.
We'll make it through 3 and 4. I have no doubt at all. So Paul says in verse 3, "For you died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God." So, how do you want to start off with this? Because I'm ready to tear the verse apart.
I remember something that you this verse, and I always found it fascinating. And I don't know if we were doing a program on this verse or what we were doing, but I remember you said that before you became a Christian, that life that you were living, it was a life full of sin. It was a life full of transgressions. And the reason that you became a Christian is because you wanted to turn away from that life. You wanted to live a new life, and you lived that life with Christ. Well, when you became a New Testament Christian through the waters of baptism and you began that new life, your past is still the past. People know the past, but when you become a New Testament Christian and you walk with Christ, then Christ, he takes, it's almost like God takes your old life and he hides it. And he hides it where nobody can see it. And he hides it to where he doesn't remember it. He doesn't remember anything in your old past, because all that he remembers now is the fact that you're a Christian and you're living a life for him. And I remember you telling me that, and it's stuck in my mind. Not a lot of things that you say, Keith, stick in my mind, but that one stuck in my mind.
It's not just you, Zach, but
yeah.
So you've got, first of all, Paul starts out and he talks in this verse and he says, "For you are dead, for you died."
Right.
And the word that dead or died, depending on which translation you're reading, it's actually a verb. It's an action word.
Mm-hmm.
It is describing the state at the end of the process.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
You have to die in order to be dead. The literal meaning of the word is to die.
Mm-hmm.
That is, on the one hand, that's what we live for, is to avoid death. If we faced death every day, perhaps our lives would be more full. But
it's kind of
like for most people, it's not something we dwell on.
Well, it's kind of like that question, if you were to die tomorrow, would you change what you do today differently? It's kind of like that question, because if you knew that you were going to die, I mean, you would probably live a life that up until that death that was a meaningful life, and you would change all kinds of things in your life because you knew you were going to die. And so that kind of goes back to that point.
But that's the physical.
Right.
And Paul is obviously speaking of the spiritual here. Mm-hmm. And he presents this not as a hypothetical, but as a done deal, as it were.
Right. You're dead.
You're dead. You have died.
Right.
But we've got to understand the sense in which he is describing this, because obviously he's not talking about the physical.
Mm-hmm.
So he is talking about the spiritual. Now, for you died and your life. Paul presents a great contrast there, because on the one hand, he's talking about death, and then in the very next phrase, he is presenting the opposite of that death. So we as Christians have got to we've got to accept death as a reality.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got to stop saying, you know what, physically, I know, statistically speaking, I'm going to die.
Mm-hmm.
Because historically, within the biblical record, the percentage of individuals who did not die is minuscule.
Right.
There are a couple of examples, but that's it. I can think of two offhand, Enoch and Elijah.
Mm-hmm.
Is there another one? Did I miss one? I think
No.
that's it. Okay, so
I mean, Jesus Christ overcame death, but I mean, he still was put to death.
right.
So
Everybody else who has ever lived faces death. Statistically speaking, you will not get out of this life alive.
mm-hmm.
But we don't live our lives in that way. And that hurts us spiritually, because spiritually speaking, that old man has to be put to death. And we'll get to that in verse 5. But that old man has to be put to death. And we must live our life with Christ in God.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the image that is being given to us in this verse, and we go back to verse 1. If you were raised with Christ, and we talked about that word raised, meaning being raised together with Christ.
Walk in a newness of life.
If we're going to be raised, we have to have died.
Mm-hmm.
We have to have been buried. Otherwise, we cannot be raised. The same image here in verse 3. We have died with Christ, metaphorically, spiritually speaking. But it is our life that is concealed with Christ in God. That life, the spiritual life, it's still there. We've got too many Christians who are living as if either, number one, they never died, or they're never going to die, or they're not living their life hidden with Christ in God.
Right. There's a lot of Christians that live their lives as their old self. You know, you look at these verses, and Paul says you were raised with Christ, and because you're raised with Christ, then your old life is going to be hidden in Christ, and you're going to be in Christ. But there's a lot of people who live their lives like, well, I was baptized yesterday, but I just don't know if this Christian life's for me. So I'm going to try to be a Christian, but I'm also going to try to live the same life that I was living, and you can't do that. It's just not possible. It's not feasible, even though we try to make it work in our minds. It's just not a feasible concept. You can't live in Christ, but also still try to live the old life that you were living.
Yeah, well, but guys, sometimes it's difficult.
It is.
Okay, for example, in my case, I became Christian when I was 17 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that means that I spent 17 years old learning stuff from the Word.
Right.
So if we put on a scale, you're 17 years old of non-Christian versus your 3 years old Christian, still the scale is heavy for the non-Christian life. So that's why many Christians discourage on this Christian life.
And that's
the point that I was going to make, because even if we have been immersed, we have been raised with Christ in baptism, we're still going home to that same home.
Exactly.
Yes.
And we are still living in the same world. And the morning after we are baptized, we probably still have the same friends. We probably have the same habits, and
nothing has changed in our lives except the fact that we now live for Christ.
Nothing has changed in our physical lives.
Right. But everything's changed in our spiritual life.
But then we have the challenge of bringing our physical lives to match our new spiritual life.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't step up to that challenge, it's not automatically going to bring our physical lives up to that standard. Instead, what is going to happen is it's going to pull our spiritual standard down to an unacceptable level.
Right.
Yes.
And Paul goes on in verse 4, and he says, when Christ, who is our life, appears. Now, and as I read verse 4, I understand Paul to be speaking of the second coming of Christ.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So that that word appear that is there in verse 4, Christ, who is our life, shall appear. It means to render apparent. It means to make manifest or visible or known. That is put in direct contradiction to hidden from verse 3, which means to conceal or by covering something.
Yep.
It's still there, but you can't see it anymore. It's always fun to play hide and seek with little kids, and you'll always have that. There's more than two kinds of kids, but the two kinds of kids that stick out in my mind are the ones who are going to find the best hiding place ever, and they're not going to make themselves revealed or known for any reason whatsoever.
Right.
Like 2 days later, you're still looking for this kid.
Exactly.
And then the other one is the one who goes and stands in the corner and hides their eyes and thinks because they can't see you that you can't see them.
Right.
Or they'll get down on the floor and they'll take a blanket and pull the blanket over them.
Right.
And
and you're like,
this is a great spot,
Right. And you're like, when did we get a new rug?
and,
Yeah.
And you got this lump in the floor underneath a blanket, that it's obvious that they are still there. Well, Paul puts these two in contradiction to one another. Your life is hid with Christ in God. And then he comes to verse 4 and he says, when Christ appears, he's not hidden anymore. We can't see him right now, but the time is coming when every eye shall see him, and everyone is going to acknowledge his return. When that time comes, Paul says, you also shall appear with him in glory.
Right.
And when we talk about that contradiction, those two groups of kids playing hide and go seek, what Paul is describing doesn't fall into either category really, because I think that there are some, realistically, there are some in the world who believe that when their life is hidden with Christ in God, that's it. Nothing else is ever going to be seen or known, or they feel like they're finished.
Right.
And then on the other hand, you've got those who are like, oh, I'm going to hide, but I'm going to hide right here in plain sight. But if I close my eyes to what is going on around me, it's not going to be evident to anyone else.
We could take this. There's another spiritual application we could go with too. You could go with blindness in this as well. Spiritual blindness, not being able to see because of all the things that are in your life. You can be a Christian. I think you could still be a Christian and still be blind because you're not doing what God told you to do. You're not living your life the way that you need to live it as a Christian. And then we could go that way as well. But I mean, I agree with the point that you're making.
Those are the ones who are in the middle of the floor with a blanket pulled over them, but the lump is still there.
Yeah, right. Yeah, is that a rug with something under it? Yeah, I get what you're saying. And it's just...
Pablo, do you ever play hide and seek with your nieces?
I'm sure he does.
We have here another game, not hide and seek. It's like you have to count until a certain number, and during that counting, you need to find a spot to hide.
Okay.
No, so that's it. But hide and seek here in Peru, no, it's not common. It's not possible.
That's hide and seek. You just described hide and seek. You literally just described hide and seek. You count to a certain number and you go.
I thought you were talking about peekaboo. Okay, sorry, my mistake.
Oh no. Okay, no. Peekaboo.
No, we're talking about the same thing, Pablo.
Peekaboo is peekaboo. That's
okay.
Peekaboo. You know what I mean?
Wait, Zach, do it again.
Now got it.
Do it again.
Yeah, you get what I'm saying? Yeah.
That's peekable. Yeah, okay,
That's
got
peekable.
it. No.
Yeah, hide and seek is literally what you just described. That's hide and seek. So how do you say it in Spanish? How do you say it
We are
in
on the
Spanish?
same page. Don't worry.
What do you call it in Spanish?
Escondidas.
Escondidas, right?
Yeah, like hiding. No, hiding.
Escondidas.
Escondidas. And we play in
Okay.
the night. Not on, especially in the night.
Okay.
All right. There we go. So
there-
you played it. That's night tag. That game's night tag. If you play it in the night, then that's night tag. If you're trying to find each other in the night and hiding, that's night tag.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway,
Yeah.
That was a good laugh. Okay.
that was a real good little laugh. I thought you were talking about peekaboo.
Okay. Anyway, Paul makes this point here in verse 4, and he says, when Christ, who is our life, shall appear, when he is revealed, when he is uncovered, you also will appear with him in glory. So here is just a cold, hard fact of life. Okay.
Okay.
You have someone who is in need of Christ. They are obedient to the gospel. They are buried with Christ in baptism. They rise with Christ to walk in newness of life. They are hidden with Christ in God. We can keep going with these biblical descriptors, all day long. They still have to live their lives. And and Zach, you mentioned a few moments ago the things before. There are still consequences from those things before.
Mm-hmm.
We are still going to make mistakes. We are not going to make it through this life perfectly, no matter how hard we may try. And that is our life hidden with Christ in God. That is not the full glory that God has in store for us.
And I read a story the other day. It was about a woman, and she was talking about how when she became a Christian, she thought that all the things that were going on in her life that they were just basically gonna dissipate. I mean, they were just going to go away. But that's not. And there's a lot of Christians in this life, I think, that have that misconception. They think that just because they've become a New Testament Christian, that their family problems, that they're going to go away, their marital issues, they're going to go away, and all these things. But those problems are going to exist the day before you're baptized and the day after you're baptized. They're going to still be there. And you've got to learn now how to deal with those problems in the spiritual state that you're in this new spiritual life that you're living. You've got to learn how to deal with those problems in the way that Christ would deal with those problems, and not the way that your old self would deal with those problems. But that they want to go back. They want to go back to the way that they were dealing with it before, rather than looking at it in a new perspective, in the perspective of Christ.
Yeah, but Zach, and that is what we talk with the new Christians, new converts, the church.
Mm-hmm.
We told them God is not a magician, no? God
Right.
is not a sorcerer that he uses
Yep.
a magical wand and disappear your problems or makes you a new person. And that even in our prayers, when we pray, we say sometimes, God, please give me patience, make me a patient person, or make me more control my tongue.
Mm-hmm.
But God is not a magician that, okay, you're a new person, okay, you have
Right.
patience. First, we have to desire
Very good
to
point.
do it. Yeah.
Yep.
So that's what we also say to the newcomers. God is not going to put you the magical one and say, okay, you're a new guy. You have to desire and work on that.
God is not a magician, but you now have power. You have control over your life, and you have the power to change those things in your life if you want to, if you have the desire to. Because if you don't,
Yes.
then you're gonna revert back to your old self. Sorry, Keith.
That's it.
And the glory that God has
My bad. I interrupted you. My bad. He's like, and the glory.
And the glory that God has in store for us is the end goal.
Mm-hmm.
But we've got to live our lives with Christ in God in order to be able to obtain that glory.
Right.
And that is the point where, as Pablo was describing, there are no more problems.
Mm-hmm.
There is no more pain. There is no more suffering. There is no more temptation. And that's what we are working to get to achieve.
Exactly.
So, okay. So verses 3 and 4, you got anything
Made
else
it
on
through.
those?
No.
Okay.
We can definitely go with spiritual blindness. We can go down that path, Keith, if you want to go down it. I'm ready, son. But if you don't, we're good. We can go on to verse number 5.
You know what? Whether we go to verse 5 or not this week, it's still in the budget. So
it's still in the budget. It is still in the budget.
Still in the budget.
But you see that verse 5, it starts with that adverb, and that adverb means what, Keith? What does therefore mean?
Therefore, it means we better stop and we better see what it's there for.
Aha! Exactly.
Yes.
It means consequently. He's gone and said all these things in verse 4, and now he's saying because of these things, then this is what we have to do.
How are we going to get to where our life is hidden with Christ in God?
Mm-hmm.
Because as we pointed out, and Pablo very eloquently, I might add, the whole magical wand analogy. Can you make that sound again?
Who, me?
Yeah, you were going boing or something. I don't.
The pring.
Yeah. So we have to get to that point, and Paul tells us in verse 5. Therefore, tying those things together, the old King James says mortify. New King James says put to death.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what do you think that word means in the original language?
Kill. Put to death.
To kill.
It's dead.
To kill.
Yeah.
Yes. Very, very good.
Woo!
But then here's where it gets a little different, a little interesting. So Pablo, did you plug in?
Senor?
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, so he says, therefore put to death your members. Now, the word members that is used by Paul here in Colossians 3 and verse 5.
I was about to ask you this question.
Okay, go ahead and ask me the question.
What does members mean?
He's talking about, literally, it is the word that would describe body parts.
Mm-hmm.
No, nothing in specific, just body parts in general. Paul says, you put to death your body parts. Now, I want we'll get back to the body parts here in a minute, but he says, put to death these. He's using it as an analogy. He's using the body parts as an analogy, and then he goes on through the rest of this verse, and he's describing these various things. But he's like saying it's as if these various things were different parts of your body.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
just like yes, like body part additions. I don't know. At some point, any analogy is going to break down.
Right.
But then he goes through and he lists these various things, and here's what's interesting about this list that Paul gives us in verse 5. And I'm going to read from what am I reading from here? New King James Version. Therefore, put to death your members which are on the earth: fornication, uncleanness, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. Now, here's the interesting thing about this list that he gives. Of those things, fornication relates to sexual desire. Passion is yet another form of desire. Then he mentions evil desire. And then he mentions covetousness, which is desire
For more.
more of whatever. 4 out of the 5 things he lists in this verse have to do with desires.
Right. And he also calls covetousness idolatry as well. So things in your life that are idols that you follow or worship or admire. So
okay. So now I'm gonna get on a hobby horse for a minute. I can do that.
a hobby horse? I've never heard that one before.
Yes.
Interesting.
Oh,
It's an interesting term.
well, that's what they say when
Pablo's so confused. I bet that doesn't translate very well.
preachers will they'll get on one subject and they won't let it go.
There you go. There's your definition, Pablo. Can you
Okay.
use that in a sentence, please?
No. As I said, I was reading from the New King James Version, and the New King James Version, the first in that list is the word fornication. A lot of translations have changed that from the old word fornication to simply sexual immorality.
Immorality.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay, so here's my problem with that choice of translation. The word
5 versions change that word. Sorry.
5 versions changed it from fornication to sexual immorality.
I think there were more than that, but
no, 3 in English and 2 in Spanish. I think I remember.
Oh, really?
Okay. Right, sorry.
Okay. Here's my problem with it. The word means fornication. Now, sexual immorality could describe any number of things.
Right.
It could describe fornication. It could describe pornography. It could describe lusting after someone or
I'm doing podcasts.
It's sorry. Zach, there is a mute button that you can hit.
Well, she just, do you have time to do preschool? Yes or no? I said no. Anyway, continue.
Thanks, Ashley.
Now it's Mary.
Oh, thanks, Mary. So anyway, here's the thing about that word in the original language, and you gotta do a little digging. The word fornication literally means an illicit sexual act.
Okay.
It doesn't just mean evil thoughts or looking at someone with lust or
Right.
any of those things that could fall under sexual immorality. It's a very narrow term, actually, whereas sexual immorality is a very broad term. And anyway, when you start looking at the word itself, it comes from a word which means harlotry. It means that it comes from a word which is the verb form of harloting, which that word comes from the noun word describing a harlot or someone who would sell themselves in a sexual way.
Right.
And so you go from the noun form to the verb form to the state of that happening. Okay, so with the origin and the etymology of the word, it's just not possible that Paul is talking about bad thoughts. He's talking about a bad act. Now, if you are having bad thoughts, don't think you're off the hook.
Right.
Because there are other things within this very verse that would describe those bad thoughts. But this is talking about the act. And the word, like I said, it's a very specific word. Not the kind of word that you would use generally, not the kind of word that you would use accidentally. This is describing the state of being in this illicit sexual activity. So, and my problem with some of these newer translations simply changing it to sexual immorality is that they've brought in
A whole slew of things.
anything.
Yeah.
And really the problem that I have with it is when you go back to Matthew 19:9 and they have translated it as sexual immorality, where Jesus says, except in the case of fornication, if you say sexual immorality, then someone might try to say, well, I've got the right to remarry because my spouse looked at someone in a sexually immoral way.
It gets rid of the specifics that are the foundation of a scriptural divorce, and it broadens those specifics into something that they're not. Yeah.
Yes. And not trying to complicate the issue, but we cannot afford to oversimplify the issue. So anyway, that's the first thing that he mentions, and this is, beyond any doubt, a word that is describing a sexual sin. And Paul says, hey, if this is a part of your body, you have to put that to death.
Right.
Else your life cannot be hidden with Christ in God.
Right.
The second thing that he mentions is uncleanness. Now, this word is describing uncleanness.
Hey, yeah. There we go. Yeah.
And
use it in a sentence, please.
No.
I'm unclean.
When you think about the law of Moses and all of the various things that could cause someone to be ceremonially unclean, you could be unclean from touching a dead body, or you could be unclean from some things that your body does naturally as well. But you go through that list, and this was something that Paul mentions here in this verse, that those who were from a Jewish background were going to easily be able to relate to. There are some things that make you unclean spiritually.
Right.
And it, and
that uncleanness stems from the sin that's in your life too. I mean, the sin that's in your life makes you unclean in the eyes of God, even in the New Testament spiritual sense. You can be unclean. You can be. What is it, Pablo?
Jesus talked to the Pharisees.
Yes.
Pharisees.
And he said, "You look like tombs." No, I don't know that word in English.
Tombs.
Sepulcros blanqueados in Spanish. In English.
Yes, and when you try to say sepulcher, it does not come out that way.
Okay.
You can't say it. It just it's like that. Hey, there are Spanish words that very, very, very difficult for
sepulcros blanqueados in Spanish. In English, how is that?
Sepulcher.
How do you say that in English when Jesus called this?
Sepulcher.
Sepulcher.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Language barrier.
We know what you're talking about.
Okay, got it.
What's your point, Pablo?
No, it's for outside they look, the Pharisees for outside, no?
Yes.
No, the outside and inside is different. No, that is what is in the word that you are trying to explain too.
Yes. Okay. So uncleanness, and we think of being unclean. We really don't even think in the terms of unclean, do we? We think more of being dirty. That's how I think in those, in that terminology. I don't think I've ever said, "Oh, I'm unclean." I'm dirty.
Okay. Got it.
Right.
Zach's just sitting there going, yeah. You know, Jesus isn't talking in Paul isn't talking in the physical sense here. He is speaking in the spiritual sense. And,
Moral correction.
it could be morals. It could be emotionally. There are any number of things that could cause uncleanness. And, those are things that I don't want to say it's relative, because that opens up the possibility of one judging in their life what might be clean or unclean, and certainly the Word of God is setting the standard for us, but that is one of those things that you are going to have to in many cases make that determination.
Time check.
We have 5 minutes remaining.
Okay. I knew we were close. I didn't know how close.
I just put my glasses on to check. Yeah, we're down to 5 minutes here. Anyway,
We'll have to leave it there and pick it up next week.
Yeah, and you know what? It might be better to just stop right there instead of trying to get into the passions, the next word that is mentioned there, and then we can pick up there next week. Let's go ahead and start trying to wrap it up. Because otherwise we're going to go over, and we don't want to go over because that would totally blow the budget.
Blow the budget.
Yes. Zach, final thoughts on verses 3, 4, and 5a.
Don't cling to your old self. Embrace the new self. Walk in the newness of life.
That was it?
That's it.
Okay.
Final
all right.
thoughts.
Good.
You think about that. You ponder it. And you'll get it here in a minute.
All right. I'm still waiting. Pablo, final thoughts.
Vámonos.
Final thoughts. Okay, we will see in the future that if we don't stop doing those things, the rage of God will come to us. No, because the Bible says that the holiness of God is against all these things. So
I think you went ahead and read verse 6, didn't you?
Yeah, he did.
Yes, that's it.
It's not in the budget, Pablo. We're not allowed to read verse 6.
Okay, from my own, it's free.
You're killing me, Pablo.
Okay, Keith, what's your final thoughts?
Final thoughts. We had better make sure that our life is hidden with Christ in God, and that we are not trying to hide Christ in our life.
Yes.
Ooh.
That was deep, wasn't it?
You think about that, and it'll come to you here in a second, and you can apply that to your life. You ever ended a sermon like that, Keith? You just think about that, and it'll come to you, and you can apply that to your life.
No, I can't say that I have. But. Okay, we want to thank you for listening. Again, this is track number 82 and episode number what? I already forgot.
You said episode. It's episode number 82.
Well, it's season 2. You know what? I'm off here. This is episode number 37
of season 2.
I've got a typo in the list. Yeah. I put 26 last week, but yeah, I need to fix that. This is season 2, episode 37. I think I said 27 at the beginning, but this is 37. Please go to our website, scroll down to the bottom, subscribe to the email list. We will not let Pablo have control. He will not send
Won't happen.
And
No permission.
We want to keep this program available, and we want to be able to see it spread and grow. But we're also, pretty adamant about staying within the budget also.
Right.
So
I like our budget.
Yeah, our budget.
No worries,
Perfect,
all encouragement.
just where it is. Quick shout out, say hey to Jared Jackson. Actually met him last Friday and had lunch with him, and got to spend some time with our good friend Jared Jackson, and we need to see if we can get him back on the program too.
Been super helpful in this process for our podcast.
Oh yeah.
Couldn't have done it without him.
You have no idea how helpful he has been.
Right.
So thanks to Jared. Anything else?
Got nothing left to say. I've said it all.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you for listening, and we will look forward to seeing you next week.
Yes.
Well, that's it.
I'll smile like Pablo.
Let's give our Pablo smile as we close here.
Okay.
Okay.
We're going to creep all of our watchers. I mean, we're not going to